Hey guys, welcome to a new What If Here. Today we are doing What If Naruto was born as a Neko. If you're wondering what does a Neko mean, it means cat in Japanese. But it also, it has a double meaning, that and that it also means a person, mainly female, though male as well. Pretty much with cat tail or ears or both, or even feline eyes, cat eyes, to pretty much having hands or feet or both as somewhat paws. So yes, so this is pretty much what if Naruto was a half cat, half human, and that was the original title, although I changed it to Nico because why not? It did actually make the title somewhat longer. But oh well. Anyway, let's get into this. So, we'd start at the night that I was born. So Hiruzen's wife would be somewhat having the child and would realise the literal milliseconds to a second or two old baby, and would realise there was something majorly different with this child. It had little cat ears and a itsy bitsy little cat tail, and she'd somewhat call over. Minato would go over to look and maybe try and snatch up his child. Though when he'd see the somewhat confused and or strange look on Hiruzen's wife, he'd go, what's wrong? Is everything okay with Naruto? She'd go, Minato, look. She'd say Minato, and Minato would then somewhat see the cat ears and would be smiling and go, are those? Yes, they're cat ears. As Minato would be confused, as he'd go, I thought you'd said that he'd have a high chance of having foxes, not cats. Like, they're two different animals. I should go, well, I thought the same thing. I told you so, of course. And I don't know why. Though after a couple of minutes of talking to one another, canon will go the same up until Minato sending the 9-tailed fox inside of Naruto, where instead of sealing half of it, he'd instead seal the entire fox, which does mean that Kushina doesn't get stabbed in the stomach, neither does Minato, which means Minato has more chakra to seal within Naruto, and he does the same with Kushina, just in case she does die before Naruto is 10 or so years old. Before, he really knows his mum, or just in case she does actually die, she'll forever, not forever, obviously the chakra in the seal would eventually disappear once Naruto tries to take the fox's chakra, or that, though with somewhat the birth and how close it was to her having the fox ripped out of her, and then the sheer amount of chakra she'd wasted from using the chains keeping the fox down, suppressing Kuma's own chakra so that it'd be stunned, and making the barrier and continuing to keep that up, and plummet her chakra into dangerous levels, but also obviously having the fox ripped out of her sent her body into somewhat shock, and that which would eventually kill her, though she would have at least a bit bit of some time with her baby. And though once she'd collapsed the change, once she poured the change back in within her, Hiruzen would run over as the medics would check on, or at least would try and check on Minto, though Hiruzen would tell them to focus on Kushina as Minto is dead. He doesn't need a medic then to go trying to heal Minto to figure out he's dead. He knows he's dead. There was no other way to seal the fox inside of someone besides from using the Reaper Death Seal, or at least that's the best way for a non-Uzumaki to seal said creature, said thing away. Yeah, and Uzumaki can use that chains to seal it inside of themselves, or some other type of funjutsu to kind of transport to somewhat silhouette into the ceiling dimension, and then transform, then somewhat shift that seal, or at least the stuff held within that seal, into a different seal, which would be child's play or easy for Uzumaki, though hella complicated for a non-Uzumaki to try and figure out. So yeah, best option Minto had at his disposal, because if Kushina had done it, then almost guaranteed she'd end up dying due to the sheer amount of shock her body would have gone through, having gone through childbirth and then having the fox ripped out of her, and the sheer chakra loss at just all of that, and plus the chains, as I'd mentioned. That would all add up, plus then resealing the fox into her. Maybe sealing half the fox would have somewhat been enough of, say, like a somewhat disturbance in her network to cause her to pass out, but not enough to kill her, as she was already massively somewhat fatigued from giving birth. So yeah. And though she'd only last somewhat a year or two due to the sheer amount of somewhat chakra and like that she'd spent, a year or two, would survive for another year or so before she'd end up somewhat dying, as the magnetic ninja, Hiruzen had managed to bring Tsunade back just for a couple of days, where Tsunade did confirm that Kushina would eventually die a year or two, or maybe even 3, somewhat down the line, so she wouldn't have long with her child. Which, it did somewhat hurt. It hurt her to somewhat know that she would somewhat just die young due to having the fox ripped out of her. If she transferred the fox over, then she probably would have lived, into her hundreds, like probably most all other Uzumakis, but having it ripped out of you and the seal just being completely destroyed, and then wasting even more chakra where it should have been kept inside of you to try and stabilize your own body, which could have given her maybe 10 or so more years to live, but no, she was pretty much, the longer she used the chains, the shorter her lifespan got, pretty much, after the fox was ripped out of her. So, yeah. And, of course, though, so Naruto would somewhat grow up, and by the age of and at the age of 6, he'd remember somewhat glimpses of his mother, though he would have pictures of him and her somewhat together from being a newborn to obviously 1 and 2 years old, so he knew who his mother was. And Hiruzen would give him, tell him stories of how she used to be when she was his age, roughly when she'd come to Konoha, so 4 or 5 years old, as she did already know a lot about Uzumaki Funjutsu. So, yeah. Anyway, Naruto was somewhat sad that someone died young and had asked somewhat what had killed her, and Hiruzen had somewhat just told him that he wouldn't exactly understand, and Naruto was somewhat annoyed that and he'd asked and he'd asked why wouldn't he understand, and Hiruzen would say, well, you'd maybe understand once you're maybe he'd say 8 or so years old, and and so that's the next time skip. So Naruto would be somewhat 8 years old, and once he'd somewhat started, or at least when he would have been the year where he would turn 8, or more so the school, not so, just because for me, I do school year, break, Naruto say will become Genin, during the somewhat summertime, or at least the start of summer, because we know they somewhat break for I think a month before the academy starts back up, to give them 4 weeks of break or something like that. So anyway, Naruto would end up somewhat after that break, with him being 7, they'd somewhat come back, and one of the first lessons was somewhat about what chakra is, and after learning what chakra is, and then the week after awakening his chakra, or more specifically opening up the chakra points that allow the human body to to somewhat, so he can actually say go through hand signs and use somewhat a jutsu that could affect his appearance, or more so a fire, say a fire jutsu, a fire, wind, water, or earth jutsu. Or lightning is more internal, but I guess still lightning would require both inner and outer chakra points to be open to allow said lightning jutsu to work. Anyway, after having somewhat those awakened, a month would then go by as because his class would then learn how to somewhat, at least to a slight degree, how to somewhat control, or not really control, but focus your chakra into an area, which would be the leaf sticking exercise. And it wasn't just Naruto. Some civilians and maybe one or two. Mainly the civilian. The civilian children that would obviously struggle along with Naruto, more so Naruto because of his much larger reserves, would somewhat struggle to somewhat properly send the right amount. He could send it there, but it was more so the amount of control he didn't quite have. Though after he'd gotten that down, so after a month, he'd be now kind of somewhat at his home, as the school had just somewhat finished for the day, and he'd be his apartment. He'd know that he's got around half an hour until his somewhat Gigi comes to pick him up to firstly go to the hospital and then kind of the vets. So hospital, because obviously he's a somewhat Neko, half human, half cat. So his cat is cat tail and somewhat feline eyes, or kind of a mix of human and feline eyes, which means that he's got so his eyes do naturally obviously glow in low light, and also that, well, yeah, his pupil will very much be, would be able to, somewhat feline, can go slitted. Yeah. No, so we'd go to some of the hospitals to make sure his human parts are all healthy, and then he went to the vets to make sure his ears, tail, and eyes, being feline, are all doing okay as well. And yeah, so, and then after that you generally get with his and Ichiraku ramen. Yeah. And so Naruto would somewhat would wonder about, because he'd somewhat the vet, more so that he goes to, that checks him out, had somewhat gave him a book on cats to give him a better idea of the somewhat nature on which he can, suspect, maybe, like, he could change, like, different body parts into different parts of a cat. More so. Or, like, leg, from human leg to feline leg, cat leg. And so he'd know what they would look like. And yeah, so he'd look at his hands as he'd close his eyes as he'd firstly send chakra into his hands, as nothing would happen. So he'd close his eyes, he'd send chakra into his hands, and he could feel his hands change, morph, morph kind of into something different. He'd open his eyes and he could see them changing in front of him, and after a bit, a good chunk of his his hands and arms as well would somewhat change. His arm going from human to feline paws. And he'd look as his hands would now be that of the cat paws. He'd have fully retractable, not nails, claws. As he'd be probably barefoot in his house, he'd send chakra to his feet as well, curious to see if maybe doing the same thing. Imagine his somewhat feet as feline as well, and he would once again feel the same kind of morphing and changing sensation go throughout his feet. And once they would and he'd just look at them, and though he'd also notice his somewhat hips somewhat widen, more so that it would be more comfortable on somewhat all fours. If he were to want to, it'd be somewhat more comfortable. And once they were transformed, he would somewhat slightly struggle to balance, though a second or so later, and he'd get adjusted to now having paws as feet, or his literal feet going from human feet to now paws, and again also having fully retractable claws. And he'd also somewhat realised, messing about, that he could individually extend each individual claw. And he'd even somewhat go onto all fours, and would somewhat feel it being obviously somewhat more comfortable than somewhat what he had tried with only human hands and legs, which were not that much comfortable. But and he'd somewhat wonder if he could fully maybe transform into a cat, or could he, or was it that because he's somewhat young at the moment that he may not be able to transform into a cat? He wasn't quite sure, so he'd somewhat close his eyes and he'd try, but nothing would happen, nothing would change. and so he'd assume that maybe once he was 12 or 13 he'd be able to transform into an actual cat or kitten. And so though he'd somewhat stand back up and he'd then, just as he's about to somewhat send chakra back into his legs and his legs first to into his legs to somewhat remorph them or transform them back into human feet. He'd hear a knock at the door as he'd realise his Gigi was there. His head would then snap to he'd then somewhat look around to his clock and would realise that he'd spent half an hour somewhat just messing about with his new-ish or transformation abilities. Though his Gigi, and from what he can remember from his mum, told him that it was some type of Geki Genkai, first generation Geki Genkai type thing. And if you're like, the villagers would hate him or something like that, not exactly. Some villagers would definitely hate him for being the holder of the fox, but others would go, he surely can't be the Nine-Tailed Cherokee because he would have foxes, and a foxtail, not catis and cattail. So Donzo's attempt to kind of make the village hate Naruto wouldn't really work. Some would, others would generally not really care, and others also would somewhat just find Naruto adorable, having cat ears and a tail. And anyway, so that's why he's not just hunted down and that. Anyway, I forgot where I was. And afterward, somewhat shout out. I'll just wait 1 minute, and he'd hear the person who he could somewhat smell his ears and would somewhat stop knocking as he'd somewhat let out his relief or whatever, and then somewhat send chakra into his feet, and we'd realise, why is it not working? He'd try releasing it, though his hands were paused now, so he couldn't. Though he'd somewhat start panicking before he'd somewhat whack himself over his head or do something, or even just fall forward, and would remember that just half an hour plus minutes ago, how he had initially transformed his hands and feet. So he'd think of somewhat human feet, and would then send chakra to his feet, and they would morph back into what they were. So he'd wonder if say that to his at his hands, would they transform into feet then? But as he'd wonder, though, he'd quickly remember Hiruzen was waiting for him, so he'd send chakra also into his hands, and would somewhat feel the odd feeling. It was a very odd, slightly discomfort feeling, but it was definitely odd when they were morphing from paws to hands and hands to paws, and same thing goes with feet. Though once they'd be somewhat back, he was already wearing something. He hadn't really gotten undressed, so he'd quickly run over to his front door, slip on his sandals, throw open his door, and would chant GG. Yeah. Hiruzen would smile and go, Naruto, how have you been? I just not go, I've been good, GG. As Hiruzen would smile and go, well, you ready? As Naruto would just nod as Hiruzen, Naruto would then somewhat step out, shut and lock his door, and they would then somewhat go on their way to the hospital. and after leaving the hospital, which would give him a full bill of health, he'd then go to the vets, which would do the same thing, and they'd then head off to Ichiraki Ramen. Though, and yeah, from there though, another, say, 3-ish years, 4-ish years would go by, as Naruto would be 10, and well, it would be a month or two before the actual, say, Genin exams, and Naruto, of course, had been wanting to somewhat, say, take it and become a Genin, as he was just getting annoyed or bored or just wanting to prove himself that he can be a strong person, a strong Nico. As obviously some people would make fun of him and that, which definitely did annoy him, of course. And Naruto would just head towards the Hokage tower, and once he'd gone up to the Hokage's office, instead of bursting through the doors or throwing them open and shouting out GG like he normally does, he'd knock on the door, and Hiruzen would somewhat look up, somewhat slightly confused, as he'd try and figure out who could it be behind the door. He, to his knowledge, didn't have any appointments with anyone, so he'd say come in, and when the door would open to reveal Naruto, he'd go, Naruto, what's wrong? How can I help you? As you know, it was somewhat roughly 2 months away from the Genin exams, and he'd known that obviously Naruto was somewhat wanting to take it, though, and well, yeah, he was somewhat waiting till after Naruto had failed, or at least if Naruto did take it, to somewhat wait until after that to give him the Shadow Clone Jutsu, as he knew Naruto couldn't perform the Clone Jutsu. He just didn't have enough. He didn't have enough. He just didn't have enough control over his mammoth reserves to properly somewhat pull out a small amount of chakra. Yeah, it was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. It was just incredibly hard to try and, exactly pinpoint it first time and do it over and over and over and over again. It was just pretty much nigh impossible with how large his reserves were. And he'd been trying since he'd learnt it, or at least learnt hand signs to perform it, and whilst he could make it appear, it generally looked incredibly sickly, or just who knows what it looked like. Just a glob of white, or just a straight up ball of chakra. Even at one time and thought he was seeing things when he'd seen a ball of chakra, and thought when enough did Naruto figure out what was going on, that he managed to keep his mouth quiet. And Naruto just somewhat dispelled it, revealing that it was somewhat somewhat genjutsu, all that. And so Naruto would somewhat look at his own go, well, GG. Is there any way that I could, any way of that could help me perform the clone jutsu? Because today Sensei told us that the clone jutsu would be a thing that would be required to know to somewhat pass the Genin exams, and while as you know, I can't really exactly do it. So, do you know any other your way of doing the clone jutsu. Here's some think about it and go, well, Naruto, so you're planning on taking it early, are you? As Naruto would go, well, yeah, why GG? As Susan go, well, I do have a jutsu, it goes by a different name, but I do know of a jutsu that would be perfect for you, but the catch is just that if you want it, you're gonna have to wait 2 years before graduating. As Naruto got what, 2 years? Yes, Naruto, 2 years. You'll be 12 at the time, and it'd be the year in which your actual age group will be graduating. So that, and also it gives you somewhat more time to, I don't know, I guess get used to, say, the jutsu, and to somewhat mess around with the jutsu. And that is, I would think about it for a while before going, well, like, what's the difference between that and the clone jutsu, GG. As here's them go, well, the clone jutsu, as you know, is somewhat of a genjutsu. It's just an illusion, whilst this clone jutsu is, well, it makes a actual physical clone of yourself, a clone that you can, say, hit, or it can, say, touch, pick up stuff and throw stuff and that. I mean, that obviously stuff won't go through it, and it can very much fight back, though the downside is that it can only do one punch, but because it's somewhat fragile, though it can be quite useful for, say, reconnaissance and that, and even somewhat training, as when releasing of said clone, you will get its memories back. As now to think about it, mull it over his mind, as would this other clone jutsu be more? Would it be enough? Would it be enough for him to? Was the price of him staying in the academy for 2 extra years, or a year and a half, or somewhat more? Was that good enough? Enough, as he'd somewhat think, as he'd then somewhat silent, and go, okay, somewhat GG, I'll wait 2 more years. I know it's somewhat hard now, though, especially for someone like you who wants to be Hokage and prove yourself out there, but though, trust me that for at least me, you don't need to do any of that. I know that you're strong, I know that you're fast, you're skilled, I know well, yeah, I know that, and yeah, and plus you may also somewhat want to, also, obviously, show your mum Krishna, who's looking at, who's looking down at you from the other one, from the Pure Lands. You want to show her just how far you've come since her death, since she left you. Well, yeah, since someone left you, since her death. And yeah, and I'll say this right now, Naruto, she's probably more proud of you than you could ever imagine. She's, every day somewhat you live and you don't, cry, and you, every day somewhat you live, you prove to her that, well, yes, you somewhat, you don't need to prove to anyone now to just how strong you are. It's not to go, well, I know that, GG, but still, I still want to show them that, a somewhat good, that I can be just as good as them. Well, you know what they call me. It's who's made nod, knowing that Naruto's scores were led him at the bottom of class, though he also knew that if Naruto was somewhat allowed to fight how he would like to, he would almost definitely win. As after all, using somewhat pretty sure you're not meant to exactly say kind of cause the person to bleed, whilst he could, and he did eventually obviously show Hiruzen that he could transform partially into a cat, so he could transform his hands and feet into paws and have fully retractable I always call them nails, but they're not claws. And once he'd shown Hiruzen that, besides them now having to have the vet check them out to make sure nothing like they are like somewhat normal feline paws and that, which they actually are somewhat. Yeah, they said that. Well, she just said that they're more obviously robust to handle the obviously Naruto's weight, as he's obviously human, but I presume that once Naruto figures out how to do a full body feline transformation, they would be feline cat. They'd be exactly like any ordinary cat paws and that. And yeah, anyway though, so Naruto very much can fight with what's the point of having somewhat trying to use say a kunai up close when you can just say transform your hands or morph your hands into paws and have fully retractable claws that will grow back over time. So yeah, a lot better, a lot more useful, somewhat. And especially as they can somewhat grab into obviously trees and allow them to walk vertically up a tree without ever once needing to use chakra. Plus, obviously having beaten somewhat main Nico anyway, did give him a much higher somewhat jump than what the normal even shinobi can. So yeah, here's with someone nod as he would then go and rummage through his drawers quickly as he would then find the scroll and give it to Naruto. Naruto would somewhat thank him and would then proceed to just somewhat sit on the floor and roll it out in front of in the Poke's office, because why not? And he was going to be fine with that, because on his schedule he wasn't really meant to see there wasn't going to be any type of meeting or that, or for at least another 2 or 3 hours or that, with any of his somewhat army or that though. And an hour later, and Naruto would somewhat get up, give, and here's him with quirking eyebrows. Naruto had somewhat tried doing the clone throughout that, but would go back to it, somewhat reading to see maybe what he'd done wrong, though this time he'd put his hands together and would shout out Shadow Clone Jutsu as a second one of him would come into existence. And here's him with somewhat smile and somewhat go, well done. Naruto would somewhat blush and would thank him for giving him the scroll, and here's him with put a hand on him and then somewhat sends them to a training ground though before that Naruto dispelled the Shadow Clone. And Hiruzen would then somewhat tell him to try and make more Naruto dust. How much? And he's going to go, well, I guess try and make, say, 10. And from there, they'd somewhat spend half an hour to an hour, somewhat going up in increments of 10 up until he hit 100. Then they went up to increments of 100 until they hit 1,000. And at that point, Huzin was just like, in his head, there's no point going beyond that. Because, yeah. And it told Naruto that he should try and, say, learn how to make the chakra jutsu last more than one hit. So to try and make a reinforced shadow clone, a clone which can take maybe 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5 hits. Or even, like a stab and still be able to fight. Or that as the second you stab a clone or punch it, it will dispel immediately. And Naruto had said okay, and had spent the rest of the 2 years perfecting and just messing about with the shadow clone jutsu. And that's obviously 2 years had passed, as it would be, say, Naruto's birthday, it would be his 12th birthday, as he'd wake up, though he'd feel a lot more cozy, warmer, and he didn't really all that mind as much, though he'd eventually somewhat open up his eyes, and he'd wonder when after he'd slipped underneath the covers, but he'd somewhat shrug and then somewhat go to move the coats of that off his head, when he'd realised that he had paws again, and he'd somewhat move his head downwards, and they were somewhat blurry, and he would somewhat panic, so he'd almost immediately jump out of bed or get out of there, and though he'd somewhat realised that either he'd gotten smaller or the room had gotten bigger, so he'd quickly run to his mirror, though he'd once again realised that he's on all fours, but being somewhat blurry, he wouldn't really be able to see, though he could barely see the mirror, so he'd walk back until he could see it, and once he did, his mouth would somewhat hit the floor, his mouth would somewhat hit the floor, as he was pretty much a full feline kitten cat. Yeah, he'd, in his somewhat sleep or that, on his 12th birthday, morphed into a cat completely, and it would somewhat be so surprised he'd end up somewhat just sitting down, and he would just stare at the mirror, as he would somewhat, unlike most people may think that he'd be a yellow or blonde cat, he'd actually be somewhat a fiery orangish. His main fur colour will be an orange, with then some fiery orange mixed in with it into the fur pattern. And he somewhat just sat there for a while, just stunned that he was now a cat, and then he somewhat remember, what about transforming back? What about his clothes? He'd somewhat challenge chakra throughout his complete body, and would think about becoming human or being human, and he'd then feel his hands, his everything transforming, and after 10 or so, say 10, 15, 20 seconds, he'd be transformed back into his somewhat Neko state, where he just has a cat ears, tails, and eyes. obviously, though they'd be somewhat humanoid-ish. And yeah, and he'd somewhat say that he'd obviously still been looking at the mirror, he'd go naked, so he'd go over to his bed and would realise that transforming from human to cat had meant that his clothes obviously were just on in the bed. It was what he ran out of. So yeah, him thinking he was somewhat under some covers of that was in fact just in his top that he was wearing to sleep in. And yeah, though from there, what I would go by as Nato would do whatever he would do on his birthday, and Husen would then come and somewhat, I don't know, he'd go, Husen would knock on his door as Nato would go and answer it. And they'd go to the hospital like normal, and then, as it was somewhat a monthly thing, and then they would then head to the somewhat fat, and once he was there, he'd asked if his GT can wait outside. If he wasn't going to wait outside, he would somewhat be slightly confused, but would do so. And they would somewhat enter as if that would ask why did he ask for his son to wait outside, as Nato would then tell said that to close her eyes as well. She somewhat looked puzzled like Naruto, but would somewhat do it, and she would hear Naruto somewhat, or at least sit down on the metal tray that generally cats or that would somewhat go on, and a while somewhat later she'd hear a meow, and she'd crack open her eyes and would somewhat go wide-eyed as she'd say, Naruto, is that you? As Naruto would just somewhat nod as she'd go, you can transform or fully morph or whatever, change into a cat now, just she'd somewhat, though her first thing to do would somewhat be obviously check his somewhat temperature. Not to remember, check temperature. Somewhat open his mouth and she'd look at Nato and go, sorry Nato, but for cats and dogs it doesn't go in their mouth. Nato would be somewhat confused as she'd then somewhat rotate Nato around, as Nato would still be confused, like why would it then go then, as you then somewhat a slout a hiss as you'd then plonk it into his butt. And that wasn't exactly pleasant having it just thrusted into one's butthole. And the reading would seem normal for any normal feline, and after doing some other checks and that would come out like a normal healthy kitten. Somewhat to a kitten he'd be 7-ish months old, around there. And so she'd close somewhat her eyes. Now to see that meant that and obviously she'd close her eyes and she'd say that he could transform back now to wood, and after somewhat a minute and a half of getting his clothes back on, he'd then tell her that she could open her eyes. When she would, she'd tell, Nato would go, why did you put the thermometer temperature in my butt? And she'd say, sorry Nato, for cats and dogs that's where it goes, in their butts. Nato would somewhat just go, really? What? wise, it gives a more accurate reading of that temperature. And I would somewhat sigh and go, well, I guess at least next time I'll know where it goes, and we'll from now on know to expect a object in my butt. It wasn't pleasant at all. It sends it somewhat nod. And those who turned that, though, or at least his feline state was as healthy as a normal 7-year-old cat / kitten. Which I told someone not, and though Naruto did explain that to you, you can really, his, or at least, in that state, anything up close seemed somewhat just blurry, and so tell them that's actually normal for a cat, as cats don't exactly see close up. They could see brilliant far away, but not so much close up. It's around 20 centimeters from their eyeball that they can focus on. Anything closer than that, and they lose all focus, and it's just a blurry, somewhat not exactly mess, but it's just blurry. And then the closer it is, the more of a mess it gets. I'd go, but then how comes your normal eyes aren't like that? Well, because they're somewhat more human. They do have obviously feline traits, like better night vision and that, but overall they're slightly more human in that. Then that would nod, and and that's where I'm going to end this part here, guys. So if you have enjoyed part 1, tell me in the comments down below, and of course if you want part 2, tell me. And there should be a poll up within probably the next hour today, so in the next couple of hours today or so, there should be a poll up where you can vote on what you want somewhat next week, Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Also, guys, I had another reason of somewhat making this episode, so I'm just thinking of it. And though the main reason why I thought of it was because I'm actually getting a kitten tomorrow, the 7th. So yes, so if you want to see pictures of it, go over to my Instagram account, which I believe should very much be I think is linked in the description down below. Anyway, though if you're somewhat too lazy to, or you're just like nah, then you don't have to worry. Go over to my community tab, and I'll probably post a picture of the kitten there. So guys, as I said, hope you if you have enjoyed it, if you've liked it, tell me in the comments down below. And guys, hope you have a good day or night, depending on wherever you are, and wherever you are and whatever time it is for you where you live. And stay safe, have a good day or night, and good bye.